Seconded by Gary. All those in favor, say aye. And those opposed, thank you kindly. Also, minutes approval of April 15, 20 minutes, please. Moved by Donna, seconded by the mayor. All those in favor? And opposed, thank you. All passed unanimously. City manager, perhaps if Richard's on, Mr. Evans, maybe he could look for our two missing members. If he's got a moment, please.
Yeah, Richard, you on this?
Oh, okay. Thank you, Sean. All right. Thank you, Sean.
Try to give Councilor
We didn't miss anything. We just did approval of the minutes. I'm sorry, Mr. Collin.
No, I was just asking Richard to try to give Councilor Norton a call and see if he's having difficulty.
Thank you, sir. Okay, so we got first item. We've got 6 items, I guess, tonight. The first item, 1.2, introduction of 10-year corporate strategic plan. I think Mr. Fogan, you're going to help us with that.
Yes, Chair. Yep, I'll be helping you with that.
Thank you. Then take it away.
Okay, I'll do that. Just want to confirm before I start that that's visible or everybody can see that?
I can.
All right, through your chair to the Finance Committee. This presentation is to go over a little bit the strategic planning process that we're looking to set in place and get some feedback. Let's see if I can. For some reason the slide isn't advancing either. There we go. Sorry about that. This slide is from the accountability or the sustainability plan that was adopted on May 4th. And you'll note in recommendation number 5 was to direct the city manager to develop a 10-year vision and strategy document that'll be used to guide all further decision-making and subordinate policy development for the city of St. John. Number 6 is direct city manager to maintain and update all policy documents on an as-required basis. Direct city manager to prepare for the development of the next council's 4-year priorities. So what is strategic plan? First off, I'm going to go over the objective of the presentation is to really go into what is strategic planning, why is it important, what are the parts of a plan, what is the strategic planning process. The objective is also to generate any feedback from committee to the presentation. And we'll be back to you later for our next step on the specific feedback on the process and the plan itself. So what is strategic planning? It's an organization's process of defining its strategy or direction and making decisions to allocate its resources to pursue that strategy. So why? Here's a couple of quotes that are pretty famous. Failing to plan is planning to fail. And a goal without a plan is just a wish. So I would say it functions like a roadmap. If you look at your corporate plan as a business improvement model that examines internal capabilities to take advantage of external opportunities. I would use the analogy of a race. You may be the fastest runner, but are you running in the right direction? Where's the finish line? Also, how did you get to be the fastest runner? A strategic plan aligns the actions, the strategies, to become the fastest runner, from buying the right shoes, training, strategy, and running the race, etc. So why is it important? It allows the organization to be proactive rather than reactive. It sends a sense of direction. It communicates priorities to the community, communicates your direction to staff. It increases operational efficiency, drives organizational alignment, and helps communicate your message. Hopefully through a successful strategic planning implementation and timeline, you'll establish a brand, and this helps communicate what your desired what that brand will be, and helps us align so we can reach that brand. So this slide shows where the plan sits in relation to other plans. So it's really designed to be your long-term plan to reach your vision. It's meant to feed into the other plans and support those other plans. Just wanted to iterate, the purpose of this slide is really to demonstrate when we adopt the strategic plan and the plan is followed, it will ensure that the goals of the long-term financial plan are met. And I know this finance committee went through a lengthy process of adopting a long-term financial plan. Well, this strategic plan is really a partner to that. And if you follow it, you'll end up at the outcome that you desired. So why is it important for the City of St. John? Well, this helps guides other plans and contains actions that are necessary for implementation of other plans. It also helps establish the need for other plans we don't currently have. For example, through the strategic plan process, you might identify a gap in a goal that you want to accomplish relating to human resources or perhaps the public safety. And that process may help you identify that you need to have a HR strategic plan or a public safety strategic plan. Next, just the sections of a plan. We'll include an executive summary, but there's two sections of inputs here. One is a PESTEL and one's a SWOT. I'll explain what those are. And then the meat of the plan is really your vision, your mission, your strategic goals, your short, medium, and long-term strategic objectives, and your high-level tactics or actions to achieve that strategic objective. So what is a PESTEL? This is one of the inputs to the plan. So it involves looking at your external environment, really. You're looking at your external legal environment, environmentally, technology, where is that going? What's your social environment? What's the economic environment like, and political environment as well? So those all become the external analysis that form part of this PESTEL analysis that will help you as an input to your plan. This is probably a term everybody's probably pretty familiar with, a SWOT. We'll also do a SWOT analysis, and it's more of an internal look at it and how we can use those internal strengths to leverage opportunities and to mitigate threats. So you're really looking at your strengths, your weaknesses, opportunities, and external threats. So those are your inputs, I would say, to really what you're getting into your heart of the plan. This slide really shows the hierarchy of the portions of the plan. When you start at the top, you're looking at your vision, which is a broad vision, and you'd have one single vision. And as you move down towards the bottom, the plan gets more specific, and also there are many. You could have many tactics and several strategies and a few objectives, with again fewer goals, one mission, one vision. I'll go into just a little bit on the different parts of a plan. First is your vision statement. We need to set a vision. So a vision is a statement of what the organization wants to be in the future. The vision statement provides the major long-term direction for the organization's planning. It's the ultimate outcome to be achieved through the planning process. So for this council, this committee, I would say, what will the city of the future be like? What roles should the city play in the future? And how should the city be different than it is now? It should also be aspirational in nature, I would say. Next part of your plan would be your mission. So your mission is a statement that indicates what the city plans to do and how it will be done. This statement indicates the reason the city exists. The mission statement serves as the basis for the development of the city's focus areas, issues, outcomes, and strategies. So the mission statement should be exciting, inspiring, and motivating. It should be short and concise. And it should also answer the following question: who are you as an organization? Why do you exist? What do you do? Whom do you serve? Oftentimes there's confusion between what's the difference between a vision and a mission. I just want to highlight that really the difference between the two is a vision is who you want to be, and a mission is what are you doing now, if you want to use that simple example. And there's lots of examples out there. You can Google difference between a vision and a mission, and a lot of successful organizations have done that and set that up. Next part of your plan is your goals. So as you're setting your goal, you want to make sure your goal relates to your mission. It should be long-term as well. It needs to be aligned with your vision and mission. So, and as an example, just to keep these a little more tangible, if you have a goal that includes to increase the population, that could be a goal for the organization. I will say that these goals need to be SMART goals. They need to be attainable. And there's no point in setting a goal that you can't reach or that doesn't take into account all your goals. You need to make sure your goals aren't conflicting. So as an example, you may have a goal to reduce your debt levels, but so then a competing goal can't be to borrow lots more capital money for a large capital project. So this process will also help to make sure your goals are aligned. So next step, if you have those goals set, it's how you're going to reach those goals. Well, that's your objective. So they're also long-term. And they need to as well be aligned with your vision and mission. So if you're on the previous slide, we talked about a goal could be to increase the population. Well, maybe as an objective, you're saying, well, we're going to increase our retention and reduce out migration from the city or the region. That would be an objective to help you reach that goal. And the next part is the strategy. Well, so how do you accomplish your objective? So the strategy is a key point here. And I want to highlight in the second bullet is that what should you change to accomplish your goal? Everybody's heard the definition of insanity, so I won't repeat it. But again, it really looks at what are you changing from what you're doing now. If you want to set a goal to reach something that's not happening organically, then you need to change what you're doing now in order to read that. So this is just an example. If you're again going back to your goal is to increase population, your objective was to increase citizen retention and reduce out migration. Maybe you find out that the part that's really important with keeping citizens here and reducing out migration is to have good parks. So what you do is a strategy. You'd say, well, we're going to build the best parks. We're going to have whatever amenities you need at a park in order to accomplish our objective and our goal. And then specifically is the next, this is where we get down to the really specific actions or initiatives that align with that strategy. So if you just set an objective that you want to build the best parks, then a tactic at the bottom would be to increase your capital investment in parks. And that's a tangible action that you can take that hopefully aligns then with your strategies, your objectives, goals, mission, and vision. So next we want to talk about a little bit about performance management. So performance management is continuous feedback and communication between key stakeholders to ensure the achievement of the strategic objectives of the organization. So as far as this plan is concerned, we should be reporting yearly. We should use that feedback mechanism to update the plan. We should report as to whether the tactics were implemented. If they were implemented, did they support your strategy? Did your strategy support your objective? And does your objective support your goal? So this is the work, I will say, of your corporate performance team. So their role is the performance management, not just the metrics. So it's their responsibility really to take this plan or take the plan once it's developed and develop the performance system to ensure we're achieving the objectives and targets. Performance metrics in action. So if you're not reaching your goal, but you are completing your tasks, you have to check to see if there's alignment or if something in the environment has changed that you need to change your goal, your strategy, your tactics, or potentially the metrics. So if I go back to my previous example, let's say you are increasing your investment in parks. So you are creating the best parks, but for some reason you're still not retaining your population. You still have an out-migration problem. Then there's a gap there that's created. Something's not aligned. And that's where you do this course correct. You'd adjust your strategies, your tactics, and that's part of your performance measurement when we report on the performance of the plan. Key performance indicators. Everybody's familiar with the term of KPIs. But the key to overall performance of the organization in your strategic plan, again, are your key performance indicators. They relate to the long-term strategy are at a high level. More granular metrics typically relate to service outcomes, internal processes, or your tactics or actions. So as an example, again, I'm trying to keep it a little more applicable here. If there's a strategic objective to increase the population at a higher level KPI would be the percent increase in population against the target. If the strategic action was to focus on certain neighborhoods, a lower level relates to measuring how would you be doing in those particular neighborhoods. So the steps for developing a KPI are outlined in this slide. So the key step is how you're going to collect that data and having the systems in place to do that. So and it's important to have both leading and lagging indicators. Again, I'll use an example of safety on this one maybe. So a leading indicator would be the percentage of employees that use safety equipment. If employees are using the safety equipment, it stands to reason injuries will decrease. So the lagging indicator would indicate the number of injuries. So again, Stephanie and her corporate performance team, they'll be developing some of these tools for reporting, like the balanced scorecard that's on this slide, and it will become part of your strategic plan. But there are other ways to report performance, such as dashboard and reporting on the strategic plan in your annual report as well. I'm almost through here. I just want to end off a little bit with the process. So this is the process that we've looked at on this slide. We'll be conducting a kickoff meeting. We'll do the SWOT and the PESTEL analysis. Once we have those insights, we'll set to define the mission and vision. We'll identify our goals. What are those objectives that align to that goal? What are the strategies to reach that? And what are those specific tactics or actions that support those? And that's probably the key one, is if this is flowing through correctly, every action you take should be in support of your long-term vision and mission, long-term goals. We'll also create a performance management process. We'll be back also, I guess, to this committee to present a stakeholder engagement process for approval as well. So in that, we want to know what groups need to participate, what ones just need to be informed, who needs to approve, including in particular the public consultation piece. We'll be back to consult on that and get approval of a stakeholder engagement plan. So who will be writing the plan? So this is a preview really of our stakeholder engagement, and we're looking for input in this presentation from committee to help us build the stakeholder engagement plan. But this is some of our early thoughts around the process. So including, we would come back to committees on monthly finance and growth committees, and also do our senior leadership team for updates. With the goal right now is to have a presentation to council after that, and to looking for an endorsement of the plan for December 2020. This would align up with an action plan for December for 2021. Feed right into that action plan. And just a thought on council priorities. We know this council has set council priorities before. So part of the strategic planning process is, of course, the setting of council priorities, and having a strategic plan will help guide the priorities. But also, council priorities will help shape the goals and fulfill the goals outlined in the strategic plan. So they should be aligned. Your strategic plan, again, is longer term. Sorry, I switched to the next line. So this diagram really illustrates how we use council priorities. So they give direction to staff and how we deliver services. They act as decision-making lens for creating budgets that allow for limited funds in areas that will drive maximum benefit for the entire community. It also sets a framework for reporting how well we do and how we are progressing and achieving the desired future for St. John. So again, they should align. Both council will be adopting both the long-term vision, mission, in our strategic plan, and also adopting short-term, or more short-term, I guess, your council priorities, which are 4-year in length. So the corporate performance team will lead council through the process of setting priorities. I will say the caveat here: if there's not a new council in place, of course, we don't know when the new council will be in place. But if there's not one in place in time, we'll use the existing priorities as an input to the strategic planning process. Again, this is the concluding slide. So our recommendation is just to receive and file once committee has had a chance to offer any feedback. And like I previously stated, we will be back to this committee with a stakeholder engagement plan, more details around the process for your next finance committee meeting. And with that, I'll stop sharing.
All right. Thank you, Ian. Ian, do you want input, a little input now, or do you want ongoing input from this committee? What's your preference?
Yeah, I wouldn't mind a little input now into just what we've outlined in this presentation. Like I said, we'll be back specifically with some thoughts around stakeholder engagement and how the process will roll out a little more detail, who's participating, where we're getting inputs, what the result of the PESTEL and the SWOT are. But if the process, if committee has any input to the process which we've outlined here, I'm happy to take that feedback or any concerns.
All right. Committee, any questions? Councillor Sullivan, please.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. First of all, thanks for the work, Ian. I think this is another important piece of our corporate structure and our corporate strategy. My concern and one of the successes of plans is that there's ownership of the plan. I mean, we all feel very committed to the long-term financial plan. We've been involved with the development. And I guess part of the process I would like to see is what is the plan of the process for post-election? I mean, we're kind of in one of those times when if we take through this process and have a draft, for example, in the spring, and then there's an election, if the incoming council doesn't have some ownership and involvement in the plan, then there's less likelihood that they will be able to stick to it. So I think we need to get moving on it. I would just like to see that as part of the process. So if you can think about that and how that's going to transition and work, I think that's important.
Great. Ian,
Yeah, I don't know if the city manager wanted to comment, but first.
Yeah, if I could, I actually see this, members of the committee, as a double barrel approval process. That is to say, we want to leverage the current council and its experience and its expertise on this to help guide the process up until the election, whenever the election is, because we don't know that yet. But we do certainly want to leverage the in-place council to help inform in this plan and develop it to the best possible. But I agree with you, Councillor Sullivan. I don't see this plan going final until the new council has an opportunity to shape it as well. Now, that said, this plan will actually never be final as some people view it. It will be a breathing document, reviewed on a yearly basis or reviewed as often as possible. But we shouldn't see wholesale changes because it's supposed to be a 10-year long-term vision. And one would hope that your vision is not going to change every year. But so we do see it as a bit of a double barrel kind of approach, old and new council being involved.
And I think that's a good approach. And I certainly agree that it needs to be a 10-year plan that kind of survives council. I guess we've got a real opportunity here. If we have a lot of the work prepared and a lot of the engagement done, and you're right, a lot of the expertise that we have now, but the next council it can't just be, here's what was developed, we'd like you to approve it. They need to be invested. They need to be elbows deep in its development as well. But I think there's a real opportunity, instead of a council coming in and then sitting down and starting to have a session and a year into their mandate, now they've got a plan, to get 4 years dedicated to a plan that's been approved. And then it's so ingrained that at that next election cycle, it's just, this is how we do business. I mean, I see that very similar to, we've had a couple of years with the long-term financial plan now, that it's how we do business. So I just want to make sure that the work that we do in this, that I think that's so key, that that next group is invested and works on it and doesn't just receive something. And I think you get the point.
Understood.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Reardon?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think it's a great document. I guess when I read through it, it would be the mission that's measurable, correct?
Yeah. So your mission is really what you're doing now. So what kind of organization are we now? What services are we providing with the vision of where we want to be? Your goals are probably the next step down. It's probably more the measurable piece as to whether or not you're accomplishing your goals, but they all need to be aligned. If there's misalignment, you're not going to accomplish any of it, right?
No. And I guess we have, but if we know, if we want to figure out where we want to go, I guess now we have, I think, a lot of the documents that tell us where we are now based on Gardner Pinfold and Deloitte, EY, et cetera, et cetera. So I would think it would be easier for us to develop something, because if we've got, we can defend it with the information that we have, and the direction is in that information that we have of what we should take if we want to make those changes. So I think it's great, because I think we already know that there are certain things happening, but what tends to happen generally is we say, we know that this is happening and this is what we want to happen, but we can't really support that right now because we're busy doing other things with our money. So that's a problem for us. If we have something that's happening that should be supported and should be fostered and is getting us what we want, but we say, well, we can't foster that, we can't do anything with it now. So I'm hoping this will align our money to the direction that we want to go in, because that's really what's going to make the difference for us of becoming what we want to become, is if we can align our cash, which is going to be difficult because there's a lot of pressure and push and pull on the cash that we have by all kinds of, by everything. So it'll be hard to align that, but with a strat plan, and I agree with Gary. I think that the next council also needs to be a component of developing it as well, so that they will run with it, because it's so important, I think, to our future. Really appreciate the work. It's pretty exciting when you read through it. It's good document. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. I would just reiterate that exactly. The whole point of this is to align those actions, those yearly actions, those small implementation. If I look at the race analogy, if you want to win the race, that's fine. That's your goal. Did you buy the sneakers? Did you train today? And each one of those steps has to lead to the longer goal. So we'll measure each step along, which should lead to your longer goal. So,
very good. City Manager?
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, I got to say it because it builds on Councillor Reardon's point. A vision without resources is a hallucination. And therefore, what's very important in this document, when we're talking about a vision and strategy document, is the strategy does have to address resourcing this plan. And that means not just money, although everybody defaults to money, time, people, capabilities, skill sets, etc. So all of the overarching needs to be part of this strategy, and that performance management framework that Ian highlighted today is, if there ever was a holy grail to anything that we do, the performance management framework is the holy grail to a long-term vision and strategy document. That is what will guide the organization. We need to get it right. It's not just processes and procedures. It's also a cultural mind shift of continually asking ourselves, how can we get better? And are we following our processes to get there? So as much as we're going to focus on the words within the strategy, there's going to be a very significant effort in the fall and through the winter in terms of getting that performance management framework correct. Thank you.
Mayor Darling? You're on mute, sir.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yep.
I wondered why you were all smiling with me on mute. So thank you very much. Yeah, so I just build on the previous comments. Well done. Thank you. And when you look at the roster of Brain Trust on the call here today, how fortunate, we are to have so many thoughtful leaders in the corporation. I have a little bit different perspective, I guess. I mean, the next council should, yes, of course, have input into this plan. But I think one of the challenges that many governments have is that they work in 3 and 4 year election cycles. And so I'm really excited by what you're leading here, Ian, with the team to put longer term planning in place. It's critical. And look, if the next council wants to come and that Brain Trust wants to add a tremendous value and they want to adjust this long-term plan, I think that's even better again. But so I'm excited by this. I've got a lot of comments here that I'd like to share, but I'll try to really summarize. First of all, you said it, Ian, in your presentation. I think it's incredibly important that we offer up opportunity to get outside perspective. Sometimes, I don't know how to say it, but I mean, that balance between internal and external, and that we ask not only citizens, but chambers of commerce, and that we are just wide open to allowing that different perspective. Hear it, whether we like it or not, hear it, ingrain that in our plan, I think is critically important, number one. Number two, I think your music to my ears around the performance metrics and all of those pieces. In my firsthand experience, writing the plan is hard, but relatively speaking is the easy part. It's the grind of executing on the plan. So I'm going to be interested to see how the agencies, boards, commissions, and departments within the City of St. John are rolled up into this plan, and how their work plans are going to drive, as city manager has said, the focus and resources necessary to achieve the goals. Because I don't want to be one of those organizations that writes a great plan and then sits it up on the shelf. And because I think what we want to be a great organization that writes good strategic long-term documents, but executes on it as well. I'm a little bit concerned just from firsthand experience that annual, and I don't think you're suggesting annual performance measurement, but in my experience, you write your plan, you put your metrics in place, and I'd like to suggest for you and the city manager and the leadership team, I'd like to have quarterly review of those metrics, not annual. I just think a lot can get off track in a year, but I'd love to see you sort of revisit that piece. And then I guess my last couple of comments are around, all of the key other elements tied to Ernst & Young, tied to strategic communications, performance measurement, HR involvement, job descriptions, balanced scorecards for leaders, individuals. So I think you're saying all the right things. Just how does this all tie together so that culturally individuals understand their role in putting the person on the moon, if I use that analogy. And sorry, I'm just looking at my notes here. So I think I'll stop there. I'm very excited. Thank you. And I did write down, city manager, not only the resources to be successful in the writing of this plan, but ultimately the resources to be successful in the execution of this plan and focusing the organization for those outcomes, and ultimately to achieve, Mr. Fogan and others, the goals that we want to achieve. So this is the greatest place to live, work, and play so we can thrive. So I'm really excited, and I want to say thank you for the work so far.
All right. Anyone else? City manager.
It was just, sorry, Chair, just a point of clarity. When we talk about annual performance reporting, what we're really talking about is the annual consolidated report.
Okay.
But absolutely, there will be quarterly evaluation done by the senior leadership team, and there will be monthly evaluation done at the managerial level. So it goes down all the way through. we cannot, and I fully agree with what you're saying, we cannot look at this once a year and see how we're doing. That's not the intent at all.
Thank you very much.
All right. So just very quickly, again, thank you, Wayne. Good report. I think what I was going to say has been said. Stakeholder improvement or input should be business. It should be council, certainly our staff, citizens, our ABCs, and the same people. I think the mayor said it. The same people have to help us to move it forward. That is the hardest part of any plan. So with that, I need a receive and file, please, Mayor, and then seconded by Sullivan. All those in favor and opposed? Thank you so much, folks. Again, thank you, Ian. Next item is Samir. You're going to give us an update on City Hall and the tower fit up, please.
I'm only going to give update on the City Market Tower's second floor renovation.
Very good, sir.
Okay, not the City Hall. So I think the report is very self-explanatory here. So what I'll do quickly go through the report, give you some background information on where we are with the City Market Tower renovation. In April 2019, Common Council has awarded the City Market Tower Phase 2 interior renovation and fit-up, which include basically the job include interior renovation and for the third floor, the first floor, the stairway, and elevator lobby. Additionally, also the phase 2 also includes refurbishment of the elevator, the installation of new heating plan, as well as new electrical service entrance, as well also the installation of new lighting system throughout the building, as well as the exterior lighting system. Currently, phase 2 is substantially completed right now here. We still have some few item here. One main item here is we're waiting for the provincial inspector to certify the elevator so we can use it. Otherwise we have minor stuff to complete it. However, when we awarded phase 2 in April 2019, we excluded the interior renovation of the second floor, and the reason we didn't do this at the time here is due to capital budget limitation. Since then, there was some changes so far here to help us to move forward with the second floor renovation. In March 2020, the City of St. John received confirmation from NB Power of grant money and funding in the amount of $675,000. And this is as a result of the implementation of the energy measure we have done in last year. So this funding is it's a new funding here. We have not accounted for it in the capital budget. So, and in response to this here, we like to use this money here, partially of this money here, to use it towards the renovation of the second floor at the City Market. So the proposed scope of work for the City Market second floor renovation will include as well the fit-up, the interior renovation, the supply and installation of all the electrical lighting system required to occupy the building, as well as the heating and ventilation of the second floor. So the proposed total cost of the project, we have engaged Eclipse, which is already there at the site completing the phase 2. And they give us a cost, and the total cost to do this around $334,000, which is include a $10,000 contingency plan. And so our recommendation for this project, for the second floor, recommendation here is to proceed with the change orders provided by Eclipse to renovate the City Market second floor renovation, which is in the amount $324,843, and further also to add another 10% contingency for the total project cost, which is around $334,843.49. Just to advise the Finance Committee here is that the building will be fully utilized, and we are in the process to finalize the floor plan for the second floor renovation. So in this here, I recommend to proceed with the change order by Eclipse for the second floor renovation for the City Market Tower.
I'll move the recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Reardon, seconded by Councillor Sullivan. Any questions on this? Any concerns? Any comments?
Fantastic news.
Thank you.
I just had one quick one. Samir, when do we think, I know we're not going to talk about City Hall here, but with the tower, when do we think you have bums and seats and sitting over there? What's the timeline? It seems to be, both these projects seem to have been backed up somewhat.
No, I can speak on the City Market Tower right now.
Yes.
So we're ready to move in. We're supposed to move in last month. What's holding us back right now is the elevator is not certified yet, and the preventive inspector cannot be on site to certify the elevator due to COVID-19. So we're waiting for him to give us the go-ahead so we can use the elevator in order for us to start occupy the building right now.
Okay, so once that's, and I understand that, Samir, thank you. Once that elevator's inspected, is it our plan, city manager, to actually move staff up there?
The fourth and third floor will be occupied once we are authorized to do so, once we have a functioning elevator.
Yes.
Just to remind you, third floor is primarily our economic development agencies. Develop SJ and Discover SJ are going in there. The fourth floor is facilities and a few other odds and sods. The second floor we were not planning on using because it was not going to be renovated, but we're very tight in the new City Hall. So by now renovating the second floor, we'll be able to relieve some of the pressure and the tightness inside City Hall, which is good news, certainly with COVID-19. For City Hall itself, we have been delayed many times, a lot of it by our landlord and the required renovations he needed to do before our own contractor went in. That's all behind us now, thank goodness. Our own contractor is in, and in terms of work, he was able to meet our 1 August timeline. Unfortunately, some of the materials that we ordered were being manufactured in Quebec. And the manufacturing industry in Quebec was, for all intent and purpose, shut down because of COVID-19. So we do anticipate another modest delay. We do think that some of the staff will start going into the new City Hall around the 1st of August. And we have as our target date to be completely moved into the new space no later than 5 October.
Very good, sir. Thank you. All right, folks, we have a motion on the floor. I'll call for the vote, please. All those in favor? And opposed? Thank you so much. Next item, please, is I think Commissioner Fudge is going to take this, another policy, budget monitoring policy. Kevin, are you there, please?
Yes, good evening.
Good evening.
Can everybody see my my screen?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, Your Worship, members of the Finance Committee. Everyone on this committee is very familiar with the budgeting process, and obviously the budget is one of the most important tools an organization has to create on an annual basis. It's your spending plan. It's a vital tool to measure performance. It keeps you focused on a target. It stops you from overspending, and it sheds light on spending habits and helps you save money. So before you this evening is the final financial policy that we had proposed in the long-term financial plan. I'm not suggesting this is going to be the last policy. This would be the final in the suite that we included with the financial plan. And this is a budget monitoring policy. And the policies created by or approved by the Finance Committee will become the foundation for the city's future financial management. And policies outlive their creators, and they promote stability and continuity. So the policies are extremely important for the city of St. John. And in terms of this presentation, the book that you see on the slide, this is the Financial Best Practice Guide from the GFOA that we've modeled a lot of our policies after. And the GFOA is the Government Finance Officers Association. Just a little bit of background of that organization. They were founded in 1906. They represent public finance officials throughout the United States and Canada. They provide best practice guidance, consulting, network opportunities, publications, research, and training opportunities for those in the public profession and government profession. And the GFOA's mission is to advance excellence in public finance. So some examples of other municipalities that have a budget monitoring policy, right there on your screen. And again, the GFOA considers the budget monitoring policy a best practice. So the first part of the policy is very technical in nature with regards to how an organization should manage its budget or establish a formal set of processes for its budget. So I won't get into the technical detail on that and put everybody to sleep this evening. But I will give some examples of why these practices are important. And I'll just highlight 2 bullets as an example. So we want our service areas, when they're looking at their budgets, not just to focus on the overall cost, but the underlying issues behind what's happening within those costs when they're budgeting. So, for example, wages and benefits. It's the largest component of the city's budget because, of course, we are a service provider, and that's to be expected. Excuse me. So in monitoring wage and benefit budget performance, looking at your actuals versus budget and creating forecasts, in order to really understand what's going on with their budget, managers need to understand the information behind the numbers, such as whether there's any vacancy data in there, what the amount of turnover is in their department, what future hiring plans are, what's driving overtime, and also what's happening with absenteeism. So you'll see on the slide some just general guidance in terms of budget analysis. The budget analysis should also link to service outcomes and performance. Again, it's just not a numbers exercise. So your budget you should also determine through your budget analysis if services were provided as they were intended in the approved budget, and if the goals and initiatives set forth by the organization in the creation of those budgets have been achieved. And this means looking beyond the numbers and looking at root causes and root information. So why does the City of St. John need a budget monitoring policy? So first and foremost, it's another best practice financial policy that will help the city remain on a sustainable and financial healthy path going forward, as this Finance Committee has made a priority. The policy will also reinforce accountability in our budget management practices. It will also increase cost control by putting in place proper budget allocation guidance. And I'll get into that in a minute. This policy will actually result in supporting the increase in the accuracy of how we budget and in our future budget development processes. And as the committee can appreciate, this policy will actually help the city become more financially resilient and will be used as a tool actually to help increase reserve funding and accelerate debt reduction just by improving the way that we budget. So this will require our service areas to manage their budget a bit differently than they're accustomed to in the past. And given 2020 is a year of change in all aspects of our lives, not just for this organization, we're recommending that the effective date of this policy be January 1, 2021, to allow the organization to breathe and to focus on the 2020 restructuring plan and sustainability plan while we reshape the city into the next phase of being a leaner, high-performance organization. So what are the objectives of this policy, and how is this policy going to change the way we budget and financially manage? First of all, wages and benefits and goods and services moving forward must be managed from a budget perspective as separate budget envelopes. And the manager's financial performance will be evaluated separately on each of those elements, as opposed to blending them together in measuring the overall budget. So, for example, in my department, I could have a $100,000 surplus in wages and benefits and a $100,000 deficit in goods and services, and I come before the Finance Committee and say, yeah, I'm on budget. Well, it doesn't tell the whole story. If I had vacancies at $100,000 and I overspent goods and services by $100,000 to compensate, I should be able to explain why and whether it was part of the original initiatives that was approved in the budget by council, and recognize that there was a reason for that. So this will lend a little bit more transparency to our budget process. We believe this will increase the operating budget performance as the policy sets forth, that service areas do not have the authority to fund new or unplanned initiatives from surpluses in their budget, as the budget was not approved with those unplanned goals in mind, and that requires a separate process and oversight. And we would suggest the mechanism to request one-time initiatives that were not originally contemplated would be through a reserve fund process that takes a corporate lens. This will in turn increase the accuracy of our annual budgeting process, as we will quickly identify all the one-time or non-recurring spends that's been occurring in our budgets, which as we strip those things out, it will reduce our future risks of having future structural deficits. And the policy improves strategic decision-making, with service areas having less flexibility to utilize budget surpluses, and with one-time spends becoming part of a reserve fund request process under that corporate lens. So what it does is it allows the organization to consider all service needs and all long-term objectives when we have surplus opportunities, rather than it being done on an ad hoc service-by-service basis, which is really more myopic in nature. So fundamental principles in application of this policy outlined on the slide, which is really the nuts and bolts of the policy are on the slide. So first of all, that we recognize that all surpluses and deficits should theoretically be non-recurring and one-time in nature. Otherwise, if they weren't, we would have planned for them and we would be 100% on budget. So we do recognize as an overriding principle that surplus and deficits are non-recurring. Fundamental to this policy, recognition that wage and benefit surpluses were never intended to subsidize goods and service budgets. And in turn, service areas shall not reallocate, justify, or offset deficits between the two unless supported by a business case and approved by both the city manager and the chief financial officer for the organization. There is a small exemption in the policy with respect to a situation where a staff vacancy is replaced with a third-party contract to do that work, as the intention of the budget allocation was to do a particular piece of work, and with respect to this, it's just being done in a different fashion. So we did provide that exception in the policy. We will monitor the budget throughout the year in this fashion, and annual surpluses in wages and benefits that again will be recognized as non-recurring. This is where the policy helps with sustainability. Will fund the operating reserve until such time the overall wages and benefits budget is adjusted permanently to reflect the more accurate wage and benefit budget moving forward. So if we see a series or a trend of wage and benefit surpluses in the short term, if it's one time, it'll fund reserves. If we see it as a trend, what that requires is a permanent budget adjustment. And if that's a downward adjustment, then obviously that helps reduce the cost of providing public service and help reduce the pressure on the tax rate. And the same process would apply with the goods and services budget. Finally, our objective is to improve our financial flexibility, and we need to be creative with scarce resources and challenging tax-based growth environments to squeeze every opportunity we can out of the organization to fund our reserves, our growth initiatives, our capital plans, and accelerate our debt reduction. So in the event the operating reserve is fully funded with this strategy, what this part of the policy says is basically surpluses after our operating budget is fully funded would be 50% to the capital reserve and 50% to debt reduction. And just for the committee's understanding, when I say fully funded for the operating reserve, in the Local Governance Act, there's actually a cap on the amount of money that can be funded in an operating reserve for a municipality. It's 5% of the overall budget. So for the city of St. John, we have a $160 million budget. 5% of that is $8 million. The capital reserve process, there is no cap on capital reserves in the Local Governance Act, and that's important for the city, given that we have a $400 million infrastructure deficit. So again, capital reserves and debt reduction, if we can find funds that are one-time, we want to direct them that way. So all departmental and service area surplus and deficit positions shall be analyzed annually to determine whether we have to make those permanent adjustments. As part of the annual operating budget process, service areas will identify annually during this budget process one-time operating expenditures, and they'll submit proposals to fund those one-time expenditures through the reserve funds that would also go before the Finance Committee with respect to those requests during the budget process. And of course, the city manager and chief financial officer shall make any and all recommendations respecting the use of reserves as part of the annual operating budget process. And it shall be in accordance with the long-term financial plan. And again, this would be the purview of council and council approval. So this is just an example of our 2019 results. You'll see that in 2019, we actually had a surplus in our wages and benefits at about $1.4 million. Again, these would represent vacancies and turnover and things of that nature. But you'll see the box behind it is we also were over in our goods and services for almost the same amount of money. And some of those reasons were requests that you've seen this year at the Finance Committee to take opportunity with respect to individual service area surpluses, and some of those decisions were sound decisions, good business cases. But again, this process would create a corporate view of those opportunities. In particular, when we're starting to go down the road of a long-term strategic plan, really consider Mr. Fogan's presentation. We set the foundation with the long-term financial plan. It was an imperfect process from the perspective that we didn't have a guiding document. So we set the foundation. Now the strategic plan is going to design the house in terms of the mixture of services and what we want to see as a community. So our financial practices have to be flexible and help us achieve those objectives as well. So just a quick example of application. So example one, staff vacancies created a wage and benefit surplus of $400,000, and I'm picking on TES or transportation today, just randomly. So a wage and benefit surplus of $400,000, for example. But we also had a one-time and significant unanticipated fuel spike due to global economic conditions we didn't see coming that put us into a $100,000 deficit in the same budget for fuel. So at the end of the year, we would recommend to transfer the surplus from wages and benefits to the operating reserve, because acknowledging surpluses should be one-time in nature. And we would also recommend funding the deficit, which is also one-time in nature in this example, of the operating reserve. So we would actually transfer a net of $300,000 to the operating reserve. Further from there, through our budgeting process, we would analyze those staff vacancies. And I put finance department as a typo here. I apologize. TES finance department. But we would analyze those staff vacancies in the department to determine if that's a permanent issue. Is that a permanent vacancy? And is there a permanent budget adjustment required? And if so, then we would have to make that budget adjustment for the following budget. Same for fuel price. We'll continue to monitor the fuel price. And if those global economic conditions become everyday realities, then the annual budget needs to be adjusted to reflect that. So with that, again, I know budgeting is not the most adrenaline running topic for anyone to see for a presentation, but I'll end with this. Subtle improvements in our financial management practices add up to a big difference over a long period of time. And that is why I believe that this budget monitoring policy is an important addition to the suite of policies already adopted and approved by this finance committee. So with that, I will take any questions the committee has.
Thank you, Commissioner Fudge. Look, another great policy just makes just a heck of a lot of common sense to me. Any questions, concerns, comments, please?
I'll move the recommendation.
Thank you, Donna. Thank you, Gary. Seconded by Councillor Sullivan. Mayor Darling?
Thank you. Yeah, just literally just wrote this while you're here, and here's what I wrote. Reality and actions don't match the external narrative by some. And the city of St. John is a leading municipality when it comes to long-term financial planning, financial policies, and commitment to being best in class and getting better results. So I guess my comments are that I don't believe there's any media online tonight. I didn't just look. So how, I guess through you, Mr. Fudge, or through you to the city manager, continued this commitment to open, transparent sharing, driving value for our citizens, and communication of the great work that's happening. Tell our story, because again, we likely have and are likely one of the only municipalities in the region that has the suite of policy and long-term financial plans that we have, So I just like to keep telling that story. Yep, we've got some challenges, but boy, with council, but really staff, Mr. Fudge, you and your team, and all the other leaders on the line, there was some really amazing work happening here. So super excited. I'm geeking out, Mr. Fudge, on the financial policies, but I'm really proud of this work. So thank you. And how do we tell this story, City Manager? We don't need to respond today, but we need to tell this story.
Thank you. City Manager?
Chair, members of Finance Committee, I would like to put a cautionary tale out there. First of all, I think this is a tremendous policy. It is needed. It will improve our understanding of where we spend our money, and it will help discipline us to make sure that we spend it in the right pot. And if the pots are wrong, it will discipline us to correct those pots for the longer term. So it's a tremendous policy. The cautionary tale I would have for you is on a yearly basis, let's face it, there are unknowns that happen. There are surpluses and deficits that will occur, which means if I was a betting man, I would say that on a yearly basis, we will be coming to council to ask authority to spend some money out of the operating reserve to address some of the deficits. It's probably likely to happen on a yearly basis. I offer it up as a thought and a caution that means that council must, in their mindset, be prepared to spend out of the operating reserve if we can satisfy all the criteria and if we can show that to council. But there is a bit of a tendency to say, oh, we've got this pot of money and we don't ever want to touch it. Reserves are there to be touched if criteria are met. And I think that's going to be an important part of the understanding of council moving forward. And it will be after this current council where people will need to understand that this will discipline us a whole lot more, but it will cause us to consider using the reserve more than we have in the past.
Thank you. Councilor Sullivan, you there? Yep, go ahead.
Isn't it nice that we have a reserve to have a conversation about?
Get that right, brother.
You're right on there, City Manager. I guess when I read through this, and Kevin, you need to stop selling this stuff short on excitement, because as a guy who's worked the last 20 whatever years in the public sector, I certainly understand a perception. I've heard it externally. Sometimes I've had it internally that there is a importance if you are in a certain department of the public sector to make sure you spend your budget. And what I see in this document is a piece of accountability that makes sure that budget monies that are approved are getting spent in the right spot. It also covers you that, you know what, if you overspend somewhere and you've got the good explanation for it, we will cover you. It's not necessarily a bad thing. But at the end of the year, you are accountable for each section of your own internal budget. It makes it much more difficult for a department to say, the description you had was you've got some extra personnel money, so maybe we buy some. In my world, maybe you buy some more photocopy paper for next year and stock up. Well, no, because that's next year's. And conversely, we've got some money left over in photocopying. Maybe we can hire an extra casual worker over here for a while, but you can't. This policy will make sure that we have discipline, is the word the mayor used. I'll use the word accountability. The other piece I'll throw out there for staff is, as I was listening to Kevin's presentation and reflecting on all the documents that we have, and particularly this one on accountability, I think the long-term strategic plan, and it was hinted at when we talked about that, we need this same sort of focus on the productivity side, and it's been hinted at. But when I look at that list of financial discipline policies, if we can have that same suite of policies or the similar HR version 4 years down the road, as the mayor said, as a municipal corporation, the structure will all be there. So I think you build on wins, that SWOT analysis that Ian talked about. And one of the strengths we have right now is the processes that we have around our financial documents. So we need to take this process that is working well and replicate it in other sections of the organization. Thanks.
Well said, Gary. Thank you. Okay, we've got a motion. The only thing I'll say, City Manager, I do agree, spend the reserves when it does make sense, but it just hit me when you said that. I remember going to Dad in high school and asking for a few extra bucks, and he would say, you better have a damn good reason. And that's what I think when you say that. We better have a damn good reason if we want to spend these reserves.
Could not agree more, Chair. Could not agree more. I did not imply that it should be open season on reserves. Not at all. And by the way, if we deplete a reserve, we better have a way to refill it shortly thereafterwards as well.
Thank you, sir. I'll call for the vote, please. All of those in favor and those opposed. Thank you so much. We'll go on to 1.5. I think, Mr. Levine, you're going to help us out with this one. It's capital budget and long-term debt update, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will, and I think this.
Sorry to interrupt you, brother. Just a second. Councillor Norton, are you online?
I am, Commissioner. I am, Mr. Chair. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can now. Yes, thanks. I didn't know.
I'm having technical difficulties on my end and unable to activate the video feature, but audibly I can hear the conversation.
Just speak up, please, if you have got something to say, Greg, because I can't see you.
Thank you for the invitation.
Yeah. Okay. Greg, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think this presentation will be a great follow-up to Commissioner Fudge's presentation. All the great work we've done around several of the policies we have. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Your Worship, members of the Finance Committee. Before you this evening is a report and a presentation on the 2019 General and Utility Fund Capital Budget and an update on how the city is progressing with this debt reduction. Here's just a snapshot of the 2019 General Fund Capital Budget by service area, and you can see the overall budget we approved was just a little below $18.3 million. City's share of that budget at the time, which we anticipated borrowing for, was just shy of $12 million, with the other share being shy of $6.3 million. Here's a snapshot of where we are from a variance analysis on our 2019 budget. So for the projects that are completed, we are showing a $700,000 positive variance. And we have still several projects that are underway, but we are projecting a positive variance there as well as $17,000. There is one project that was canceled, which is showing a $305,000 variance. We also reclassed some projects that we didn't move forward with in order to have those funds reallocated to the city market tower renovation. I also included a detailed list for the general fund and utility fund in the copy of the report. You want to see it by project. But overall, we have just over $1 million positive variance. Just a quick snapshot of where some of the variances came from. Transportation and storm had a favorable variance of about $500,000. A couple of our facilities, such as our municipal office building and the Peter Murray Arena, were under budget. IT was also under budget by about $228,000, but I just want to highlight with IT that all the funding comes from its internal reserve. So even though we are under budget, we will anticipate spending that money in the future. But overall, I just want to highlight that the staff is managing the capital expenditures and ensure optimal delivery of projects within the approved capital budgets. So what is our impact on the debt? So when we first approved this, we stated that we were probably going to borrow the majority of the city's share, which was just shy of $12 million. But with the positive variances, that is going to be reduced by $817,000. And also, as you are aware, we passed the debt management policy back in 2019. And in that policy, it stated that we were going to gradually increase our pay-as-you-go as an option to finance our capital over time. So in the 2019 budget, we had budgeted just over $700,000 plus a couple other adjustments. We ended up having in our pay-as-you-go $900,000. So overall, for the 2019 capital budget, we were able to reduce our expected borrowing because of our budget variances and the pay-as-you-go by $1.7 million. As you recall, the debt management policy, we set out some debt limits. We recommended that the general fund debt per capita not exceed $1,600. There was also another recommendation that the general fund debt service ratio shall not exceed 12%. And as well, the third recommendation that the general fund debt outstanding as a percentage of the operating budget shall not exceed 70%. So how are we doing? Well, here's a snapshot of our general fund debt balance, and you can see approximately where we were when this council came in. You can see where we are now today at the end of 2019. We're down to we're just at $102.4 million. $100 million. So our debt per capita, as you can see as well, along with our debt reduction that we now are down to 1,516 per capita, compared to 1,748. That service ratio, again, we are seeing a decline in that. We are now just below 10%. We have a policy cap of 12%, and we're well on way to achieve our target of 9% by 2020. Total debt to budget ratio, again, positive trend. We are decreasing. We're down to just below 64%. And again, our cap is at 70% with a target of 50% by 2030. The 2019 utility fund capital. So again, that was just shy of $7.6 million approved. We had pay-as-you-go as $4.7 million. Other funding was about $2.7 million. And I just want to highlight again with the utility, there was no new debt anticipated to be borrowed. And we also just found out that we're going to secure some additional funding, and I believe there's a council report going to the next meeting that will highlight that. But again, there is some challenges over the next several years to close the infrastructure debt. However, there is a continued focus on the debt retirement for the utility. Just to highlight some of the capital variances for projects completed, we have a positive variance of $99,000. Projects ongoing, we're anticipating a small deficit of $65,000 with a net overall positive variance of just $33,000. But we also have about $2.5 million worth of projects canceled. And if you recall, a few council meetings ago, the water main lining was canceled at 1.5, but that funding, a lot of it is gas tax funding. So we will be using that. And a good example of that is just approved a water main project for Champlain Heights for a large portion of that. So this money will get used. Again, just a snapshot of where we are on the long-term debt and projection. Again, we anticipate for no new borrowing over the next several years. We want to get that debt down, and you can see by 2025 we're back down to about $57 million. So overall, we continue to move in a positive financial direction to highlight all these wonderful policies that we implemented. But you can see how the capital budget policy feeds into the debt management policy, and again, this ensures that we're going to have our long-term financial plan success. Debt for both funds is being reduced. Targets that are set out in the debt management policy are trending positively. And again, our capital programs are being delivered on budget. With that, the recommendation is to receive and file this report. And I would like to answer any questions any of the members would have.
Thank you, Mr. Levine. Look, I've said it before and I'll say it again. I hate debt. Debt kills. It just, look, I know we're going in the right direction. I'm thrilled to see that. We still have a service ratio of 10%. That means the first dime of every dollar we have goes towards servicing the debt. But I love that graph that says by 2025, 4.5 years from now, we've got a plan to be under $60 million. So thank you. Committee, any questions, comments, concerns?
I'll move, receive, and file.
I've got a mover. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Mayor Darling. Thank you. Councillor Norton, you okay?
We're okay here, Mr. Chairman. No,
Yep.
It's all great content. I know I've been quiet just because I don't have the video feature, but everything that's been presented tonight is certainly very positive news.
Thanks, Greg. Okay, I'll call for the vote then. All those in favor? And opposed? Thank you so much, Greg. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
1.6, COVID-19 update. Ms. Arbor, are you going to help us with that? Please?
Yes, I sure am.
you.
Okay, just going to share my screen here. Can everybody see that?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Through you, Mr. Chairman, your worship and members of Finance Committee, good evening. Since our last update a month ago, the COVID-19 pandemic has continued to evolve throughout the world. Total cases have exceeded 4.4 million, and there have been over 300,000 deaths. New Brunswick, however, has been relatively successful in containing the virus when compared to other provinces and countries. While we are still under heavy restrictions, we are beginning to see some of these restrictions beginning to ease. The New Brunswick Recovery Plan consists of 4 phases. We are currently in phase 2, which is called the Orange Phase. Almost a week ago, restaurants and malls were given the go-ahead to reopen. Slowly, businesses are beginning to reopen while maintaining safety protocol. Phase 3, the Yellow Phase, is the next step on our road to recovery. While we cannot predict when we will enter this phase, it could be 2 to 3 weeks from now. Throughout all the uncertainty, our economy has suffered terribly. With interest rates hitting rock bottom and unemployment rates at a level we have not seen in decades, St. Johners continue the daily fight of making ends meet. With so many St. John residents already struggling before the pandemic, and despite all the financial assistance programs put in place by the Canadian government, many businesses in St. John are still fighting for survival. Given our already challenging financial environment, the city could now be facing even further obstacles to achieving long-term sustainability. While we cannot predict the long-term consequences of the pandemic at this point on the city, there is certainly a risk of a decreased property tax assessment base and an increased structural deficit. So looking to the rest of 2020, we have made some assumptions in preparing our forecast. The rest of the year, we will not get to a green phase, as this phase will require a vaccination or herd immunity. This means that businesses will have to continue to operate with social distancing and cleaning protocols. Additionally, most of the same assumptions we used in our April estimates still apply. However, some have been updated to reflect the move into the recovery phase, which we had not seen back in April. Also, it should be noted that additional waves of the virus could happen, and we could move backwards in our recovery. This forecast does not take into account drastic steps back in the recovery plan. So if you look at our estimated revenue loss, the left-hand side of the slide, the dark blue bars, represent the range of revenue loss we had forecasted in April. So we thought we would be somewhere between 2.9 million and 5.9 million. With all the additional info that we have now, and I guess the additional time that has passed, on the right-hand side, the light blue bar is our updated expected revenue loss for 2020. So from a general fund only perspective, we expect to lose about $5 million of revenue. To compensate for the planned 2020 revenue loss, the city has put in place a mitigation plan that is made up of various measures that include restrictions on overtime, hiring, and part-time employees, to name a few. At this time, we expect that our mitigation efforts will fully offset our lost revenues. So in conclusion, we are monitoring our financial financial results very closely, and as more information emerges, we will continue to look to ensure that our cost mitigation measures suffice and compensate for the revenue loss. And if required, we will certainly look to additional measures. So thank you for your attention, and we're now happy to take questions.
All right, thanks, Ms. Arbor. Any questions, comments, concerns, please? All right, again, Mr. Norton, you okay?
We're okay here, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you. And Don, I didn't see you. Okay, you just showed up. Thank you. Mayor Darling?
Yeah, sorry. And Mr. Chair, I know you and I chatted just quickly, and I don't want to take any. My thought, through you to perhaps our Commissioner of Finance or the City Manager, just in terms of some of the longer. So thank you, first of all, for having this mitigation plan in place. We're all reading about the two-handed economists. On one hand it could be this, on the other hand it could be that. What do we have to keep our eye on into 2021 and in particular for our municipality? Where are we vulnerable? Certainly there's a lot of speculation out there. I'm hearing both firsthand and anecdotal comments about the ability for some local folks to weather the storm. So I just want to make sure we're keeping our eye on this, not and I know no one has suggested a big check mark on the page and we're through this. So I wonder if we could get a couple of comments, Mr. Chair, from maybe our Commissioner of Finance or our City Manager.
Yeah. Commissioner Fudge, can you help with that, please?
Sure, Mr. Chair. We are keeping a very close eye on the situation. In fact, not just the Finance Department, every commissioner in the organization. So we are doing monthly analysis, detailed analysis, right down to the lowest level of a budget you can imagine, where the commissioners are going through it. They're looking at what variances, what impacts. We're keeping our eye on, obviously, what's going on with the federal government, whether there's stimulus or funds that are going to be available. I know FCM is advocating very heavily. Municipalities is a frontline service to many communities across Canada, and we're getting hit very hard, and there's been no relief provided for municipalities. In particular, our next item with respect to St. John Transit, you'll see some of the concerns there. In addition, obviously, we're very vulnerable to tax-based growth and the unconditional grant. 90% of our revenue comes from those two sources. And just to give the committee an idea, we've been assuming in our forecasting for structural deficit purposes 1.5% tax-based growth. 1.5%, if that eroded to zero, that represents almost $1.8 million right away. So it's a significant amount of money. So we are keeping close eye on everything from what we're managing ourselves to what's happening with other levels of government. And as new developments transpire, we will certainly be coming forward to Finance Committee and Council to provide you updates.
Thank you, Commissioner. City Manager, you've got a comment?
Mr. Chair, through you to the mayor, what I would add is both a long-term consideration and a short-term consideration. Long-term, we had a discussion this week with the chief economist of the province, we being all the chief administrative officers of the cities. One of the key indicators moving forward will be property value. So it'll be through the fall, we will be monitoring very closely what's happening with property values, both in terms of buying and selling, because that will in fact be an indicator on property tax assessments moving forward. So that's the longer term for the impact into 21 and beyond. I just want to remind the committee that the province has said repeatedly now that our tax roll for 2020 is assured. So for the remainder of this year, we don't have an issue with the tax roll itself. On the short term that Don Arbor was speaking about, at Common Council on the 25th of May, we will be explaining what services we can still afford to restore and which services need to continue to be suspended during 2020. And it is that list that we will expose to you at Common Council that was the basis of this analysis. This analysis right now is telling us that we have $5 million of lost revenue, and we're going to make that up with $5 million of cost mitigation. We can balance the budget, but there is no room to spare. So the challenge will be at Common Council a week and a bit from now is I know there will be pressure, and there's certainly requests from our community to do more here or do more there or restore this or restore that. The bottom line, members of Finance Committee, is based on our current projections, we will not be able to afford to do so. And we will show you what we believe is in and out in the current situation for council review. But if council has an appetite to do more, we will be in a deficit situation at the end of the year, which of course we cannot be.
All right, thank you, City Manager. Anyone else before I close this one? All right, this one scares me. This is there's so much danger and unknown out there. I mean, we talked about assessment value. You want to believe, you must believe that there are businesses out there right now trying to do whatever they've got to do to reduce that tax burden, any tax burden, okay? But assessment, property tax would be one of them. And although the province says we're good for 2020, 21 is wide open. So I think it's already been answered and spoken to. I'd want to know where we think we're most at risk. I would think that's one of it. And secondly, again, it's been answered. It's been spoken to, not answered. It seems the feds, there's only one taxpayer, but however, the feds are handing out monies and sure we'll be there to find out what's available for municipalities if that happens. But there's just so many unanswered questions that as soon as staff can answer some, like contracts we have coming out, the better. Just narrows the gap down some for us. So with that, we've got a receiving file. Someone move that?
I'll move your receiving file.
Okay. And seconded by the mayor, was it? Don, did you want to speak again? Okay, very good. Yeah. I'll call the vote then. All those in favor? Thank you so much. And opposed? Yeah, thank you. Last item 1.7. Ms. Dion, you're going to help us out with this transit, please, Mark?
Absolutely. Just one moment here, and I'm going to share my screen.
Thank you.
And just a verification, can everybody see this?
Yes.
So good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the Finance Committee. I'm here today to make a request of the Finance Committee to seek $200,000 extra to our annual operating subsidy. This is going to be for the month of June. As you remember, back in early April 6th, we did a presentation to Common Council with respect to COVID-19 and how it was impacting the Transit Commission. And basically, at the time then, it had completely hindered our ability to receive any funds. We had to suspend fares on our buses to ensure that we maintain social distancing. And at that time, that made us receive zero funds on our bus. So part of that presentation was talking about the safety and all the things that we've done. But the secondary part of that, which we'll talk about more tonight, was related to the financial side of things and the impact that COVID-19 was having on our cash flow. Back at that time, we expected us to be cash flow negative by mid to late May. Now, there's been some updates with respect to that, some of the things that we've done and something that Kevin Fudge or Craig will talk about later, but I'm just going to go through the rest of this presentation and talk more on the financial side of things and how much it has impacted St. John Transit and consequently how that could impact the city of St. John. So a couple things that I want to talk about just for those that may not be fully aware. Just, you know, our 2020 budget was set out at approximately $10.2 million. 4.3 million of those dollars was generated from revenue in-house, whether it be through cash fares, monthly fares, rent through the library, all those things. The other portion of our budget comes from a city subsidy, and that amounts to basically $5.9 million. That's what was approved for our 2020
Can I
budget.
interrupt and ask you to advance your slides?
My apologies. Wasn't going ahead there. So a few things about St. John Transit. We are a legal entity. We have our own separate bank account. We have our own separate payroll, our own separate CRA number. And we're also governed by the Transit Act, which states at the end of the day, whatever the subsidy is decided for the Transit Commission, that amount is to be paid out in 12 equal payments at the start of each month. Again, just to reiterate, COVID-19 and the ensuing state of emergency restricting the number of people on our buses has drastically impacted our ability to collect fares. Now, we have been at the forefront and the leaders. We were the first transit system to reinstate shields on our buses, and that allowed us to start collecting some fares. A few important highlights that I want to bring forward before I talk more about the financial deficit that this is causing. So we have reduced our operating budget by more than 25%. Unfortunately, this was achieved through doing layoffs with our permanent staff. And we've also reduced our schedule from 97,000 to basically 71,000 service hours. And that's almost a 27% increase. In doing so, just for reference purposes, so people know, that saves just in fuel consumption of approximately $500 a day. So good savings there. When this was originally talked about back in April, you know, we had a target with some of the restrictions put on us by the collective agreement that this wasn't going to be able to be in place by May 25th, but we worked closely with the union. They worked very well with us, and we were able to get the reduction in service 2 weeks earlier up to April 26th. Just as a point of information for everyone to know, the majority of our buses, you know, we're still under the limit of a maximum of 9 people plus a driver on a bus. With the service reduction that we've put in place, most of our buses, most of the time now, are carrying 9 passengers. There's the odd segment where people are less, but I've tried to get on our buses 3 times in the last week, and to the credit of the drivers, they've been doing a good job at only allowing 9 people on the buses. Expected to see some more concern from the public with respect to businesses reopening, and I think as businesses open more and more, this is going to create a greater problem by only allowing 9 people on a bus. Again, just for edification for the board here, we are leaving behind about 70 to 100 passengers a day. This goes up and down depending on certain days of the week. When certain checks are out, obviously the number's higher. And just to reiterate again that we were the first to install plexiglass shields back on our buses, and this we did this effective April 16th. So that has helped a little bit with, at least from our cash fare revenues. We're doing right now about 50% of what we would typically do. So now what I want to talk to you about is really three different scenarios that, with respect to our deficit, that we feel have the potential to happen. And I guess it's important for everyone to understand this, because at the end of the day, if our deficit grows, that means that there's going to be a request made of council for more money at the end of the day. So the first scenario I want to go over is assuming that we keep our service as it is today. So we've made a reduction of basically 75%, and we're still only able to maintain 9 passengers on a bus. And as you can see from the graph here, our current deficit as it stands today is $378,000. And if this first scenario holds true and we're able to get back into good service by July, that deficit is going to grow to the tune of $1.2 million. And so that's one plausible outcome that could happen. The next scenario, and these scenarios are going to get better as we go forward. So the second scenario is if we're able to return to full service, meaning we go back to our 97,000 hours, and we're able to fill our buses to capacity. So no restriction on the 9-person limit. Assuming we can do that and get everything back in place by July, again, our current deficit, 378,000, but that will taper off a little bit. And by the end of the year, that deficit would grow only to 676,000, which is better than the 1.2 million in the previous example. The final scenario, which hoping we can get to, is as follows. So basically, we're hoping that the restrictions are lifted from 9 people on a bus. We can fill our buses to capacity and keep our reduced schedule in place till the end of the year. That basically means we'd be running at 75% capacity. If that scenario pans out and things evolve as we hope they will, that will mean that our deficit would go to $204,000 at the end of the year.
Sure. Because all these scenarios, 9 or not.
The range there, I guess, goes from $1.2 million additional subsidy to the city to only $200,000 extra to the city. With that said, I was going to pause here and go for questions, but I'm going to turn the floor over to Mr. Fudge and just allow him to make some final comments there.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Mr. Chair. If I could just add just a few comments. We did add a couple slides at the end of this presentation. But before I jump right into the financials, I do want to recognize the efforts of the St. John Transit Commission, the General Manager, Mr. Dion, and all the employees of the St. John Transit Service for their dedication and passion for serving this community, in particular during the COVID-19 conditions that we've been experiencing. I'd also be remiss, and we talked about it earlier, not to state that the financial pressures you're seeing here this evening with St. John Transit Service is not unique. It's being experienced across Canada, across the country. In fact, it's one of the highest financial pressures that municipalities are facing is with the transit services and the loss of revenue. And there was an article just yesterday from Halifax with the significant tens of millions of dollars in forecasted deficit with respect to their transit service. So I do want to recognize that. We have taken a look at the proposal here this evening at our department and the situation in St. John. As Mr. Dion had indicated, as of the end of April 2020, year to date already, St. John Transit's already in a deficit position of $378,000, which means by the end of the year, if it was to remain at that level, the city would be obligated to fund that, and that's not part of the city's annual operating budget. So with the current mandatory restrictions in place right now at 9 riders per bus, again, that worst case scenario, under that worst case scenario of a $1.2 million loss, really what that represents is Transit's bringing in about 25% of their normal average monthly revenue right now under these conditions. So that worst case scenario of 1.2 million, and then we get into the what if game, right? And Mr. Dion got into that discussion. What if, the conditions are eased or restrictions are eased and are lifted, and things get a little bit better with respect to collecting revenues, and you get into perhaps a 700,000 deficit position or a 200,000 under a best case scenario with, conditions of cost containment being in place for the rest of the year. So based on all of this, the bottom line is there's some uncertainty, but what is certain is that the St. John Transit is going to face some cash flow pressures very soon. If Mark, if you could go to the next slide, please, it'd be greatly appreciated. So they will, under the current conditions of 9 passengers per bus, Transit would run out of cash sometime in July. So given the uncertainty, I know the recommendation this evening is to just provide a budget increase, but that's not what I'm recommending this evening, given that I would like to see what's going to come in the next little bit with respect to some of these restrictions. So what I'm recommending is that you direct myself to provide St. John Transit Commission their July operating subsidy early. So their July operating subsidy is $491,000, that's budgeted. So we would advance that early in June, so they have sufficient cash to operate. And then with that, I think Mr. Dion alluded to it, in the best case scenario, that council resolve that the St. John Transit keep in place a parameter of reducing costs by 25% over the remainder of the year. That was a resolution from April 20th. We recommend, given the uncertainty here, that remains in place. And that the city and the commission continue to advocate to the province and federal government for funding relief for public transit, and that for any final decisions on how to permanently fund transit with respect to their budget for 2020, that we come back in July's Finance Committee meeting. We give a better understanding of what we see in terms of restrictions in revenue. It is starting just to ramp up now in terms of before April, there was no revenue collected. Now we are collecting revenue, and hopefully restrictions will be lifted in the foreseeable future. If not, then we'll deal with it in July. But my recommendation is that we would bring a refreshed presentation to the Finance Committee in early July with updated projections for the Finance Committee to contemplate and to make any recommendations with respect to transit, their service, and the funding to council in the month of July.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee,
City Manager.
If I could just add on before you open it for discussion, certainly agree with the CFO's assessment that there's still a lot of uncertainty here. We have formally approached the province and asked them to allow us to increase above the 9 passenger plus driver. In other words, to not follow the gatherings of no more than 10 on our buses. I am optimistic that we will receive a favorable response to that in the coming days. And my optimism is based on the reality that we're already accepting that, for example, for air travel, whereby so long as people are wearing masks, airplanes are not following social distancing or gatherings of no more than 10. So I do believe in the not too distant future, we will receive permission to have more than 10 on our buses. It will require people to wear masks on our bus, but that's a small inconvenience to increase the passenger load. That said, there is no guarantee at all that our passenger load, our ridership, will return to normal forecasted levels, because certain businesses are not reopening, others are opening, but with minimum staff and certainly with far fewer patrons. So there is that heavy degree of uncertainty at this point. Best case, we could see ourselves a couple 100,000 short at the end of the year. Worst case, it would be more than that. And that's why we're recommending that for now, we make sure that the Transit Commission remains solvent, that they can pay their bills, if you will, and that we return to this committee and then to council in the early July timeframe, whereby then we'll have a much clearer picture for end-year forecasts. But between now and then, we feel quite strongly as a city that the commission must remain on a reduced service level whereby they have reduced their cost by a minimum of 25%.
All right, thank you, City Manager. I just want to make sure, everyone, that the motion put forward is what I like to see. The motion put forward is Mr. Fudge's version of it, okay, where we won't agree to loan them any money at this time. We'll advance their July payment and see whether the story improves.
I'll move that recommendation of Mr. Fudge's.
Do I have a seconder for that? I need to, okay.
Seconded.
Thank you, Councillor Sullivan. And Councillor Reardon, you did have your hand up, please.
I just wanted to say that I think that is a reasonable and respectful path for us to take to advance the money and to see where this all goes. You know, as the city manager said, everyone's in dire straits, so we'll just have to wait and see how it all rolls out at the end of the day. But I'll let you go since I have a dog barking in the background now. But yes, appreciate that motion. That's great. Thanks.
Mayor Darling?
Thank you. Thanks for the presentation. I do agree with the recommendation. Couple of questions, Mark. Just looking at, so I think City Manager talked to it a bit around, did we anticipate being able to increase some ridership? I think we talked about, putting that ask in to the province. But I guess two things. One is on each side of the ledger, what would it take, and has the commission debated, contemplated putting rates up? And look, we have no choice. It's going to be an extra loony a ride or whatever. Have you debated that option? What would it take for us to to offset these losses on the rate side?
And I could speak to that. The commission has not debated that yet. That said, as everyone knows, the commission is undergoing a review from Stantec that we hope to have in place, at least get a report back in August. That could be part of those recommendations that they bring forward, but our board has not discussed that at this time.
Okay. So I guess I'll, so I guess three things I'd leave with you. Firstly, from my perspective, I would ask that your board discuss that immediately, not wait till August. Come on, we're going to be under a lot of pressure. I get that folks are very sensitive, but where's that fine line between having to throw in an extra dollar? Well, I don't know what the number is, Mr. Dion, but I just would ask you to have that discussion on behalf of taxpayers immediately. Secondly, what further cost reduction could happen? And thirdly, would it be better to cancel some routes altogether and focus on a more dense area? Not knowing your business, the business, but rather than try to preserve some routes, would it be better to focus on a dense area and control some costs that way? So those are the three sort of thoughts that I wanted to put on the table.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mark, did you want to respond to that?
Yes, please. So we have done an evaluation of our routes. And as I mentioned before, we did go from 97,000 service hours down to 71,000 service hours. And we did take a look at typically our highest usage routes. We eliminated everything that didn't have even good usage, to try and focus, like you mentioned, on that core of routes. So we have put that into place right now. And as I mentioned, our buses are traveling with the maximum allowed on them now under these current conditions with COVID-19. And I think if we could get that restriction lifted, those buses would be very full right now.
Great, thank you. I think I saw Councillor Sullivan first, please. I'll be right with you, Donna. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I think my overall thoughts are probably in line with what the mayor's had to say. I'm going to take a step back from it because I am in absolutely no way a knowledgeable expert in transit. I will simply say this because today is the Transit Commission. In the not too distant future, it will be many other ABCs that we fund coming and saying, you know, because of COVID-19, I certainly understand, but we cannot afford to change the budget. And because ultimately, we just heard 10 minutes ago that we had to find $5 million on top of 10 million that we're finding for next year, on top of we don't know. So all of these, and certainly with respect to the work that the Transit Commission is trying to do with their balance, I can't in all good conscience say, because it's that extra $200,000 if we were to change their budget today. What service, where are we taking it from? Are we increasing our rates to taxpayers? It's not there. I think it's a good idea to advance the cash in order to keep them solvent. But for me right now, the Transit Commission and, you know, with respect, if it was anything that ended in commission that was in front of us today, I think my answer would be the same. And we can't afford to be changing their budgets. So, but advancing the cash, I am fine with that. Thank you.
City Manager, do you want to make a comment on that?
Not directly on that, but just a point of clarification on our previous presentation when we said $5 million lost revenue, $5 million of increased costs. We did factor into that calculation an amount for an operating deficit in transit. So there is something baked into that. I forget the exact number. Ms. Arbor could probably state it. So we're not going in with blinders shut, but we still believe it's not till July that council should even deliberate whether or not to fund that higher than its current forecasted budget.
Thank you, John. Councillor Reardon?
Thank you. Listen, the commission, this is reasonable. We don't know where this is all going to go either. And we may get to a stage where we just have to say we have no transit service that we can offer. But for now, we're hoping that, you know, between the feds and the province, that there will be some relief for transit commissions or for transit systems. And, you know, we could cut routes and do all this other stuff, but we'd be doing it without any real data. And the problem with that is that when you tinker with the system to a certain extent, you lose some ridership. We've already lost a lot of riders with COVID. You lose more ridership. It's hard to get your ridership back. So we would, at this point in time, rather wait. I mean, this report is supposed to begin in August, maybe September. So it's not that far away, our operational audit. So I think it would be reasonable for us to go along, come back in July and see where we're going with it all. Like I said, we don't know where it's going either. And we just had a presentation on COVID. Nobody knows where COVID's going and where it's taking anything. But, you know, maybe we will get to a point where we say we're done with transit for now. We have to shut the system down. I don't know what's going to happen. But I don't want to start having a knee-jerk reaction to it. I just want to sort of try to stay the course and see what the feds and the province are going to provide for us. I'm actually going to meet with Dorothy Shepherd next week. You have about $25,000 every month that was collected when you combine social development and the Department of Education. So the Department of Education is not going to be buying passes now till the fall maybe, but social development has this month now begun buying those passes again. So we'll see where that goes. But I'm going to meet with her because this is an important component for social development as well. So I think the talk of transit needs to be broadened as much as possible at this point in time. Anyways, thank you so much for listening.
You're welcome, Councillor Reardon. Again, Councillor Norton, do you have anything?
No, Mr. Chairman. I just support the CFO's recommendation there as it relates to helping the Transit Commission out right now.
Thanks, Greg. All right. With that,
Mr. Dion's trying to get you, Mr. Chairman.
I apologize, Mr. Dion. I'm sorry, sir. Go ahead, please.
Quite all right, no problems. I just wanted to piggyback a little bit on the comments that Councillor Reardon mentioned. You know, we're doing this to try and help us through the short term. We're constantly evaluating everything that we do to try and make sure we're as fiscally responsible as possible. So this is really an interim solution, and I've already spoken with the board about this, and they were also in support of Mr. Fudge's recommendation as well. So not something that we've lost sight on, and we are staying focused on it to try and keep on top of this.
Thank you. All right, I think enough's been said there. I would urge you to go to whoever's doing the study, was it Stantec, and ask them sooner would be better. We'll come July after this money's forwarded. We'll want some answers. I don't think we can kick the ball down the road any further than that. But, I also understand tough to answer these questions in this environment. Okay, with that, there is a motion on the floor. All those in favor? And opposed? Thank you. We'll take that as unanimous. That is the last item. Ladies and gentlemen.
Mr. Chair, I just need to confirm, and it might be just a time lag. Councillor Casey, are you for or opposed?
Councillor Casey?
I am for.
All right, sorry, it was a time lag. His hand went up after the others. My apologies.
Appreciate that. I didn't catch that. Thank you, John. Ladies and gentlemen, just before we adjourn here, I just want a couple of minutes, and that's not long enough. I was asked not to do this, but I don't believe we can go any further without mentioning this last item. Tonight's meeting is the last meeting of the Finance Committee that will see Mrs. Kathy Graham. Kathy is retiring shortly. She's had well over 30 years of dedicated service to the city of St. John. Kathy started way back when, Kathy, as she started part-time with Parks and Recreation and moved up, hard work and passion for her city, moved up to be the controller of the city of St. John. So just hats off. Kathy, we thank you so much for your service. I'm going to miss you. I'm going to miss your guidance. I'm going to miss your leadership. And I think the city of St. John, the citizens don't know it yet, but they're going to miss you too. So that's not enough, but that's all I'll say. So hats off to Mrs. Graham.
Mr. Chairman, could you make Kathy turn her camera on for a second so at least we can wave at her and see if she can see us back? That was beautiful commentary. We can't see her because we'd be hugging her right now if we could. So there she is.
Graham, hello.
Hey, Kathy. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kathy. All right. With thanks very much again, folks.
Motion to adjourn.
Lord German, thank you. Those in favor?
Great meeting. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
Good night.
Thanks, Chair.